The first item on the agenda, I'm going to give it about a half hour before we take a lunch break. It is the open work session for the proposed legislation for the property tax credit for disabled law enforcement officers, rescue workers, and the surviving spouse of a fallen law enforcement officer or rescue worker. Mr. Arnett, if you don't mind, and your guest.
Mr. Cannon, can I just brief the council quickly on how this came about?
Certainly.
So I worked with a citizen group last year, and they proposed this enabling, it's state legislation that allows the county to enable these tax credits. I asked Mr. Cannon to put it on the agenda in December, and when I saw the brief book, it was changed significantly. I did have some conversation with Mr. Mitchell, and then this morning I got another opinion from Mr. Wilbur. So I'm hoping today we can refocus to the original proposed legislation and work from there. I think that it's almost like a cricket in a microwave. You know, this is popcorned all over the place, and we've gone from a one-paragraph bill to 6 pages. So I don't know if we can. I don't know if it's proper to ask that we go back to the original that the citizens proposed and work from there, and then we could give our attorneys some guidance on what or Mr. Wilbur, Mr. Mitchell, whoever's going to work on it, give them some guidance on what we'd like to see.
Understood. Yes, we talked in December, and I think you're aware, as well as discussions I had with Mr. Arnett. I was trying to get a fiscal note from the executive in reference to this, and they were trying to review it very carefully through finance to find out exactly what the impact might be. If it's $5,000 or if it's $500,000, I felt it was our responsibility to make sure that we didn't just pass legislation that committed this county to an unknown number. So that was the reason for what I consider to be the delays. We finally did get a response from the executive and the finance director, I think it was maybe a couple of weeks ago, where they actually said, we've reviewed this and we've actually come to the conclusion that there is nothing conclusive about what the financial impact might be. I realized also that Calvert County or Carroll County, one of the two, had also said, even in their documentation, that they couldn't come up with a really true fiscal note on this. So at that time, I realized that we were going to greenlight this and we were going to get it in the second meeting in March. So those are the reasons, in allowing enough time for everyone to vet this properly. On another note, before we get started, the original bill that was drafted referenced a particular section that mentioned the fact that there was, through the state of Maryland public safety article, that, as I interpreted it, that a firefighter from Pennsylvania or West Virginia or Delaware or Virginia would qualify. And I had concerns about that, as these are the firefighters in Wicomico County. This is Wicomico County citizens who are footing this bill. And I wanted to make sure that we had a bill that was sort of, geared towards Wicomico County. And in understanding the state law, of course, those were counties that were bordering Pennsylvania, I assumed, or bordering West Virginia or Virginia or Delaware. I think that's why the state created such a broad allowance in its definitions. So I simply talked to Mr. Mitchell, and I said, let's make sure that we try to isolate this to Wicomico County, being as it is a Wicomico County bill. And the second part of that was, and it probably where I may have taken too much of a liberty, was I had said to put a limit on there of a maximum of $1,500 property tax, knowing that that would come before the council, and the council could make, and I've had individual conversations with the council members that if they chose that they wanted to make it unlimited, so no matter what the value of that house might be, that individual would receive the benefits of a property tax, so be it. So it is coming before the council as is, and that's where we are today.
What do you mean it's coming?
Mr. Arnett to be.
What do you mean it's coming as is?
Excuse me?
What do you mean it's coming as is? The original?
What you have in here
What we have.
represents the 1,500, and the council can certainly will be at liberty to amend that any way they choose.
Wouldn't it have been more appropriate to have the original bill and hash that out in the work session?
I think in retrospect, it may have helped, but my concern was the legal, I wanted our legal people to give their best evaluation of what was going to work in Wicomico County and would legally fit for this, for this body and for the county as a whole.
Yeah,
But there were no other intentions beyond that, except for allowing legal to take over.
Can I point one thing out?
Certainly.
The citations to the public safety section do not include that information. That's a misunderstanding.
Mr. Mitchell, could you speak into the microphone?
I'm sorry. It's only picking up the language that's used for the police officers and the correctional officers is basically workman's compensation language. The same with the full-time paid firemen and EMTs. There's a change because with the volunteers, it's a little bit different. Because they're not full-time, they wouldn't come under some of those things, and they have a different section in the public safety. That's what the difference is. And what it did was initially, it was drafted so it just said those sections of the public safety. But it was the sections just saying going to the fire, coming from the fire, those kinds of things. It wasn't the whole section. Then there was a question about taking out the citation, so it was just changed to pick up that wording from the public safety article to set forth the activities that were covered. That was no subterfuge or anything. That was just to show a clear definition. The state law is pretty darn vague over what's covered and what's not. One of the other issues that came up was because of wanting it to be in Wicomico County. I think it's still in the current version, but it was set up so that if you were working wherever you lived, if you were working for a Wicomico agency when you were injured or died, you would be covered. But you got to keep in mind that only the Wicomico County is the one giving the tax credit. So you basically have to have a house in Wicomico County, or there's no credit to be given. So some of the language in there may look like that, but that's because it's like it originally was drafted and it said the fact that you're injured outside of the county does not bar you from recovering. Well, that's because if you have to work for a county agency, you might be in a mutual aid situation and you're going outside the county, you're going to Selbyville, you could be in Delaware, you could be in Somerset County, whatever, but as long as you're working for a county agency, it would cover you the way it has been drafted. I guess the other issue that was raised by the woman that was up here, I guess it could be set up that if you were living in Wicomico County and working for an agency in the surrounding area, that Wicomico may say covered. But that's an option for the council.
We don't need to include that. I mean, it can just be Wicomico County is offering this tax credit regardless of where you've been injured.
Yeah, it could be. And there's
Okay.
another thing to keep in mind. And I don't know why the state, I mean, I know why they did it, but it causes an issue. The state legislation, enabling legislation, says it's where you're domiciled or were domiciled at the time you die. But it doesn't, but as to a person who's disabled, it's the time they're adjudicated to be disabled. Well, you could be living in Montgomery or Howard County, Carroll, Garrett, or wherever, have an accident, be injured on the job, move to Wicomico, and 18 months later, you're adjudicated to have been disabled. Well, then you're living in Wicomico at the time you were adjudicated, as opposed to the time when the event occurred. I don't think we can change that because that's in the state legislation, but that's sort of created some of the drafting issues to keep it Wicomico.
I think the concern about working in another county, such as Anne Arundel County, Baltimore Washington International Airport, PG County, we have a lot of volunteers in Wicomico County, volunteer firefighters, and they've taken a job and they just drive up there. They're on 24-hour shifts and they drive up there 9 times a month. And if they get injured on the job in Anne Arundel County or one of the other counties, we've lost a volunteer firefighter in Wicomico County. So I think that's what the intent of that was.
I have a question on that, Larry. I mean, wouldn't that be Anne Arundel County's responsibility to pass similar legislation since they were?
That's a tax credit for the home, and if they don't live in Anne Arundel County, they're not going to get that.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right.
But
Yeah, so they're volunteer in Wicomico, but they're paid in Anne Arundel. I see what you're
Correct.
saying, yeah.
Now, keep in mind,
So we've then lost a volunteer. that's
keep in
living
mind the
in
public
Wicomico.
safety articles that were cited and now are just parts are used. Those are to give benefits to the person who's disabled or the family, the one who dies. This is different. This is just a tax credit. So this is just something on top of that. In other words, if somebody's injured in Anne Arundel County, they may cover that they're probably covered under workers' comp. But this is a different thing. This is an additional benefit.
Right.
Can I fill in some of the
Yes,
gaps here?
please do.
So, in response to the issue with Wicomico County versus out of, one of the ways that it was addressed in Carroll County was to make it reciprocal. So the way they did that was the county in which you were injured had to have this benefit in order to get the benefit in the county in which you were living. So, for example, in Wicomico County, if you worked in Anne Arundel County, who has this benefit, and you were injured and you lived in Wicomico County, you would benefit from that. But if you worked in Howard County, who does not have this benefit, living in Wicomico County, you would not benefit from that. While I say that, the numbers are so small, infinitesimal, that I don't think you're gaining anything other than an argument for changing one versus the other. We're talking about the difference between probably less than 100 people down to less than a dozen people. Wicomico County, the FOP gave us numbers, and I didn't hear her say directly, but since 2000, 22 years, 5 people would be eligible under this draft for this legislation. 5 people in 22 years. That's an astounding number. So if you add up FOP, the few from IFF, which we weren't even able to put a single number on under the draft that was proposed second, under my draft, 5-ish. Corrections, almost impossible to find a number on. We're talking a very small number of people. So that's where let's give the most benefit to the most people, knowing that the number is so small, rather than trying to carve out such a small number of things. Remember that each time they have to apply. So the county has the ability to look at each individual circumstance and give them the benefit or not give them the benefit based on their situation.
Well, no, I don't think that it's not discretionary. If they fit the bill, they get it. If they don't, they don't. It's not a case-by-case evaluation.
What you're saying is if they're applying for it, and this becomes fiscally a huge burden, suddenly we have all these people that qualify for it, we could modify the bill.
Yeah, by passing another bill.
Can I ask you a question? You said you talked to the sheriff and said there was only like 5 people.
FOP, yes, sir.
Okay,
I talked to the FOP.
but you gave that number. What would be the number if we open it for all disabled people in the county, regardless where they come from? Do you know that number?
That's everyone currently living in Wicomico. I talked to the FOP.
But I'm not talking about just the people that worked here. I'm talking about the people that are living here, that came here from other states, that are here that we don't know about. And if we pass this thing, what are those numbers? Do you know those numbers?
I don't have the ones from other states.
No. You're not listening to me. They live here from the other states.
Let me finish, if you let me finish my sentence. I don't have the ones from other states, but I do have from other counties in Maryland, and it was 5.
Okay, but we like you said, it's minimal with the people from the county. We know that number. What is the number of other people from other states, other counties that live in here that could benefit from it if we pass it? You got the numbers from the sheriff's department. What is the number for anybody else?
It's not the sheriff's department, sir. You're two different things. Let's leave states out of it, because you can amend it to
Well,
other counties in this state. It's 5.
that live,
Everybody.
but does this legislation cover, does your legislation cover anyone in the country that lives here now? Or is it just any member that got injured in the county?
I can jump in. The state law says you have to be domiciled in the state at the time it happens. It doesn't say Wicomico County. It could be Garrett County or whatever. But yes, and they could be under the state law injured in another state. That's true. That's exactly true.
So do we know that number?
We do not.
So we can't say it's going to be minimal because we don't know that number.
Is the intent to give the tax credit to anybody that was injured? For instance, if somebody retired in New York City and moved to Wicomico County, are you saying they would be eligible for the tax credit?
When I talked to the FOP, I said, can you tell me all of this disabled law enforcement that you have, state, anyone who's currently living here? Don't break it down by county, by
Right,
state,
but I
by
had a totally
country.
separate question.
All of them,
Let-
and it was
let-
5.
I guess I don't understand, how would the FOP know that information? Because if somebody retires or gets injured in New York or Pennsylvania and moves to Wicomico County as just a resident, they don't join the FOP.
Well, so this was a best assessment, right? I mean, how else do we get the information?
Well, it's
Keep in
still,
mind, they have to be, under state law, which we can't change, they have to be domiciled in the state when the event, well, if it's a death, it's when the event happens. To me, that's kind of the screwy thing. It's not real clear because it's when it's adjudicated if it's a disability. I think it still would have to be here, but
right, and I
You
think
might-
some of the
might be honest.
concern, from what I heard from other council members, is they're concerned that people from New York City will retire down here and expect to get the tax credit. Is that the intent?
Okay, so that was discussed, and there are 2 ways to look at that. Number one, they're retiring on a medical disability from a salary of, New York City's an outlier, but let's use a typical salary of a firefighter, rescue worker. We're talking $60,000, $75,000. We're not talking $100,000 millionaires, anything. So when they're coming here on a 66 2/3, they're not buying $1 million homes. They're buying homes that are $350,000, small property tax numbers. The other way to look at that is they're also coming here and spending their money other places. They're buying homes, you're getting into transfer tax. They're shopping here, they're buying other things here. So they're bringing tax revenue here in other ways. So that's an important thing not to forget. So yes, bringing people here is a good thing. That's something this council has worked to do for a long time, is bring people to this county. So just because we bring them here for a different reason other than that, it doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing. I don't think anybody intends on putting up billboards to bring disabled rescue workers to Wicomico County. They're gonna have to know this exists. Trust me, nobody knows, very few people know this even exists in the state. I was disabled almost 3 years ago. I had no idea this existed. So nobody's telling anybody about this.
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew. Nobody's making this. So I don't think you're going to have hundreds and hundreds of people driving to Wicomico County to try and get this benefit.
And all the firefighters I know want to stay on the job as long as they can because they love it. They enjoy it.
Just a quick comment, but to me, that's not the issue, or minimizing the amount of money or the impact. To me, addressing the concern about someone coming from another state, moving here from New York, and then trying to receive this benefit, I think that can easily be addressed in the language if, getting back to what you said, Andy, is, you have to be domiciled in whether we make it the state or the county,
I'm trying to find that language
Right.
now, but
But at the time the incident occurs that resulted in the disability.
that's the problem. The dwelling has to be owned by the disabled officer at the time the fallen officer at the time it happens, but if it's disabled, it's the time they are adjudicated. And they have time to buy a house, because they have to be a resident. I don't see the language right now, but I believe it says they have to be a resident at the time it happens. But resident and owning a house, not the same thing. So they have time, in the way the bill's been amended, to have 10 years to buy the house.
And that language sounds vague because you mentioned officer, and it could be a firefighter or an EMT or a paramedic.
Well, it says law enforcement officer or rescue work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
Yes.
just a point of clarification, the original draft that was sent out to the council members is something that I originally drafted at the request of Councilwoman Nicole Ackley, and then we forwarded on to Mr. Mitchell. I have not seen Mr. Arnett's version of this bill.
I was assuming that the one you received was the same as Mr. Arnett's.
It was, I had emailed you the edits with Mr.
So he edited what I
Yes,
originally, okay, okay.
I believe it was on page 3 of the original. I don't know if you have that.
I think,
I'm looking at the state.
Oh,
I thought it was in there, but I'm
A question, Joe?
fine.
yeah, well, question, statement, whatever. I think we got two bills here. Obviously, there's some disagreement between those. I would say that we postpone this until we can have a little further coming together with the parties that were involved in drafting them. Keep in mind that we are going to be talking about in the near future tax credits for our volunteers, which is a must-needed. I think that's something that's going to need to move forward. So we're going to have to see what the physical impact of that's going to be. Also, there's two things. Well, that's not on the table now.
Yeah.
This is a different thing. Very clear about that. But I think this is something that party, both of these things, that party is interested in.
So would it be possible to have Mr. Arnett and Ms. Bragg, and I don't know if that's the title I should use for her, to come back and at least be in the audience if they have any answers to some questions we may have?
Oh, without question. I mean, that's why I asked Mr. Arnett to be here today. I wasn't familiar. I made the comment, anybody that you wanted to bring with you, and I can't remember how that was exchanged, whether that was with you or that was through Mrs. Hurley, but that was the original. So yeah, Mrs. Bragg could be here as well. I wouldn't have a problem if Mr. Arnett wanted to have, and it'd be up to the council, discussions with either Mr. Wilbur's office or with Mr. Mitchell. Because the last thing we really want at this table is trying to sort through all the legalese,
Yeah.
because that'll take us a year.
You got two bills here. I got it written, John's version and Nicole's version. I think John and Nicole and maybe Andy need to get together and have this settled out before we spend hours sitting up here not agreeing, talking about it, and ending up when we're done, we don't have anything. So
My input was really simple in what is characterized as John's version. I only had two concerns. One is that, in reference to what Mr. Arnett had said about only being so few people involved in the process, the last thing I wanted to do is go to a fireman's meeting and, a year from now, or any of us, and someone says, oh, yeah, that bill you passed, really good bill. You're paying for everybody up in Anne Arundel County, or you're paying for everybody in Pennsylvania. And I could understand their frustration. I want to make sure this is a Wicomico bill because this is Wicomico County. And so that was the one issue, because the original bill referenced section 7-202 of the Maryland Public Safety, and that literally says that it does not matter where you are domiciled, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Virginia, and that it should be acceptable for you to have benefits. Is that correct, Mr. Wilbur?
It's the scope. I think
No,
one of the big issues is the scope of who's going to get covered
Right.
by this.
So the only reason.
I think that actually says you have to, that's where I think the language that you have to be domiciled in Maryland is. And then it says, but you could be hurt somewhere else. But that part of it, being the Delaware and all that, that's what I told me, that wasn't part of the citation. The citation was strictly to the activities you were performing at the time it happened.
So,
I think the thing that would be helpful is if the council gave direction on what it is that's important. Is it the cap? Is it you have to be working for Wicomico County even if you're injured elsewhere? Or maybe it's like Mr. Dodd was talking about, maybe you could be working elsewhere but be a resident of Wicomico County. We can then look at the bill, and make it fit that, and then you can discuss what does this really meet what you're looking for?
And I believe that's why we should have seen it, the original, before we've had any changes made.
So are you saying that we should, the council should furnish input to John and Nicole and you and,
I think that might get a little bit confusing. I like what Mr. Dodd had to say with having Mr. Arnett submit what he submitted to me is the original draft and let's pick an attorney, whichever one wants it.
We'll all work on it.
And work on it. And then
go from there.
Go from there. Because I think right now we have 3 attorneys at the table. We probably have 3 different opinions.
And I thank you all
But
for the work.
And with all due respect, I don't think that really solves the problem. The problem is not what Mr. Arnett wants. The problem is what the council wants. I mean, what they want is to limit to Wicomico County, or limit the amount, or limit the duration, or those things. That's what we would put in there for you all to discuss. If
I think
you
we need
start
to
off
see
by
it
saying, well, this is
first.
what I want, and the woman that was here says, this is what I think we should have, we're still floating around because we're going to be drawing up 8 or 9 different, well, it wouldn't.
Still have to have a starting point.
You need a starter. I think we need to just have a starter and amend from there.
maybe we should also hear from
Two-
somebody from our Volunteer Firefighters Association and maybe somebody from one of our police agencies.
Yeah.
I think there'd be a good chance to have some input from them. I think this is good, but I think it needs tuning up a little bit,
Yeah.
or quite a bit,
Which one?
Both of them.
Yeah.
both of them.
Both of them together.
Look, I guess what Andy's sort of trying to get at is whether or not the council as a body wants to see benefits going to individuals that were injured outside of Wicomico County, whether they're willing to accept that
Be this big, or is it?
at this point right now.
Yeah.
That's what they're looking for. That's the guidance Mr. Mitchell's looking for.
And maybe we can discuss that further at the next
I
work
think
session.
that's what they're looking for in order to bring anything back to
I
us.
would like to see it within the state, because that would align with the state law. Or throughout the country, I think that when we're talking about the state, that's reasonable.
Okay, and if I could just comment on that, I addressed that, because it says somewhere it says they must be domiciled in Maryland. But of course, if you're living in Wicomico, you are domiciled in Maryland.
Right.
So I think and I don't think it's drafted to be broad so much as it is to say you must come at least within this. It gives us, I think, the right to go down, but
We don't want them
others may disagree.
We don't want them domiciled in Montgomery County.
No.
And then moving here.
And I agree with that, but Mr. Arnett brought up some good points, and that's why I thought I wanted to think about it longer. But right now, I'm leaning towards no.
I agree that there were good points made, but again, Mr. Mitchell needs clarification before he gets into any discussion.
I mean, basically, we have 3 versions. The one that Laura and I tweaked and Laura did, and then a second one where some changes were requested and made, and then a third one that made changes to some of those. I mean, they're all.
I thought the suggestion was to start with the original and go from there.
No, I understand that, if that's what you.
Because right now, with 3 things in front of us, that's confusing.
But and I don't want to belabor it. I'm just saying that those other versions may be what you're looking for. In other words, you say, well, let me see this one. Oh, yeah, this one covers that.
And that's why we talk about it at the work
Right,
session.
Right.
Yeah, so,
I
you-
agree, I
so, I
agree.
mean, the concerns have been expressed. You know, I mean, there's a variety of them, but I think getting back to Joe's point, yeah, there's a lot more work that's got to be done on this. Because I'll just be real frank, you know, I'm making notes here with some questions I might have and so forth, but it might not even be relevant because I don't even know if that's, which one is pertinent to. I mean, Nicole, you made a comment about, you know, make this less confusing. It's hard to get much more confusing than it is at the moment. So I think,
Yes,
yeah,
it's
we
very
need some
confusing.
things certainly, and plus, we're just looking at this too for, if we're not, you know, parties that were involved to this all along, you know, we're seeing this for the first time. So, yeah, there's a long ways for us to have to go here to sort of get this figured out. But, yeah, somehow getting this, you know, is how you eat an elephant one bite at a time. Yeah, if we can narrow this down some to make it a little more digestible.
Well, again, trying to narrow it down for Mr. Mitchell, too, the original references definition of qualifications based on the Maryland Public Safety Section 7-202. That specifically says, while providing emergency or rescue assistance, and it says, a benefit under this section shall be paid regardless of the district in which the beneficiary was disabled or regardless of whether the beneficiary was disabled in this state, Delaware, the District of Columbia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, or West Virginia. This particular section doesn't reference where you're domiciled. That was my concern in the original bill, unless I've misread it. Is that right, Mr. Wilbur? Yeah. So that was my first concern, and that was the only reason I went to Andy and Mr. Wilbur and said, hey, what's the, you know, here's the concern that this immediately says someone in Pennsylvania can get qualified. And I felt that was sort of out of what any county would want to.
I think they're good concerns, and I think that's where you, powers to be here, need to sit down, work this thing out, and bring back to us. And, you know, we're all available by phone.
You know,
You
one
know, you can call.
possibility here is we come back with something that has a couple of different alternatives.
Right. Okay.
Alternative A, B, or C.
That would be
Council
good.
needs to choose one.
That'd be
Right,
Something
good.
like
and
that.
I was also going to suggest that maybe, and Laura can probably do this, decide what we're calling these, because when I look at the one I call the original, that's after I tweaked Laura's. I think there's another original out there, because the language that John just raised is not in what I call the original. It cites that same section, but it only cites subpart A, 1, 2 little i's, 1 through 5, which are the activities. It wouldn't cover the rest of that, because we covered in that one that we worked on together, it covers the fact that you could be out of Wicomico County as long as you're doing it for Wicomico County. The chances Wicomico County sending somebody to Pennsylvania, not real great. Delaware, yeah, or Virginia, maybe.
I think the council can agree that they would want the individual to be domiciled in Wicomico County. Is that correct?
Has to be.
Yes.
As a lead.
We're
Okay.
going to give a tax credit.
The only other issue then I guess would be of concern is whether the council wants to see it be a maximum as to whether, you know, as to whether the average house in Wicomico County, they stated from prior assessments was 110,000. And I think that number is very low compared to what the assessments are going to be next year. So the other question is whether the council wants to see any limitation or whether it's whatever the determination is of the value of a house.
I was looking at it, I was looking at a percentage with a cap,
Or a percent, it could be a percentage.
percentage with a cap.
And I'm thinking a cap as well. I mean, you know, and Tim, to your point, you know, the assumption is, and the most likely scenario, you mentioned someone's buying a $350,000 house or less, you know, but that may not be the case. Right. Someone could have gotten a large settlement in a case, but they also could have wealth. You know, they can own other properties and so forth, you know, so you could, you know, in a, like be outlier situation where someone, you know, but someone could be very wealthy even though they're disabled. So some kind of cap would prevent that.
Or the opposite, by the way, of that, to be clear. I mean, just, it's nice hearing all the conversation go back, but you know, in Wicomico County, 35% of the folks that are of home, or, you know, of age are you know, over 21 don't even don't own a home. So and I can't imagine the folks that are on disability have a ton of cash, but you never know. So we're automatically losing 30-some% of the people that even could potentially apply. So I don't know. To me, something. Well, I don't want to spend much time talking on it, but I think a cap and of a certain amount and a given percent, I think would make a lot of sense.
I would agree with the cap. I think the percentage is dangerous only because if you do have the lower number of people and the people that are struggling as a result of a disability or in that disability pension, you could potentially,
Right.
Not benefit them enough. So a cap, no disagreement there. We don't want, exactly what you're talking about. If you have a $6,000 or $7,000 property tax payment because of family wealth or whatever, you shouldn't benefit from it just because. But
That's a good point. Yeah, so a cap more so than a percentage.
Right, yeah. And
Okay.
I was solely talking about a cap.
And that's how it is
not a
now. It's
percentage.
100% up, but not to exceed a total actual
Right.
credit of 1,500.
Yeah, and the 1,500 is strictly arbitrary at this
Well, I
point in time.
You said it was up for discussion.
Yeah, sure. Mr. Wilbur?
Just procedural point. I'd like to introduce Erica Witt. I'm sure some of you are wondering, who is this person? Well, this is Erica Witt. She's with us. She was a prosecutor in Somerset County. She lives in Wicomico County, and she's going to be working on county projects.
So who are you prosecuting, Paul? Yeah. Who are you prosecuting?
That's her former life.
I didn't ask you, Paul, because I thought I was supposed to know her, so I didn't want to embarrass myself.
I know some of you have met her, some of you haven't, so now you meet her.
Would the council have any concerns as far as Mr. Arnett spending time with either Mr. Wilbur or Mr. Mitchell?
I have no problem.
We're okay with that? Okay, good, perfect.
As long as we come back with one document.
Yeah.
instead of
Yeah, we'll
three
come
or
back
four
with one
different documents.
document. You can certainly give us the others for review, but
You okay with
a
that?
final document would be great.
One document is regular print and one paragraph.
Tim's okay with that.
Easy to read. Yeah, Joe says one page only. All right, thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Paul and Erica.
At this time, we're going to adjourn for lunch, at which time we'll come back for an open work session in reference to proposed pay and classification plan and discussion of Harrington and Langler properties. Okay, we're reconvening as Wicomico County Council and Legislative Session 2022-05 for March 15th, 2022. We're going to have a small adjustment to the open work session schedule. We're going to first discuss the Harrington and Langell properties, and after which we will get into the proposed pay and classification plan. We do have Mr. Paul McGillis here.
Here you go, Tim.
Yes, please, if you don't mind. We're Mr. Wilbur is supposed to be here, and the acting county executive, I believe. Mrs. Hurley, do you know about where Mr. Wilbur is?
I can.
See if he's back in the executive's office. Thank you. All right.
Laura
Yeah.
and I had some constructive conversation. We're going down memory lane. She used to be an associate with us, so she's asking if I remember all these people. At my age, I'm forgetting a lot. So, anyway, Mr. Wilbur.
Hello. Get that file out.
My file's bigger than yours.
Yeah, your file's getting bigger.
Mr. Wilbur, is it you, is John going to be here, or just you? Just you, good, perfect. If you could state your name and, for the public.
Paul Wilbur, County Attorney.
Palmer Gillis, Gillis Gilkerson.
Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Mr. Wilbur, you want to let
I'll
us know
just
where
try
we
to
are?
summarize what we have here. Mr. Gillis has been working with the state for a couple of years, I think, on this project. I don't know if, do you all have the little plat in your materials?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
we do.
There's about 2/10 of an acre of, I think it's trees and brush, right at the corner of 50 and Hobbs.
Shortridge Stadium corner.
Right, it's the stadium's stadium's back this way. And I think the idea is to develop a Wawa on this side, right? And so it's that turn into the stadium on Hobbs Road. And the idea is it would increase visibility for both the Wawa and for the stadium. Mr. Gillis has stated that he will pay all cost to see that the trees come down, that a deed it come from the state to Wicomico County. He would get all permits and approvals needed to do that, be responsible for any damages. I assume also put grass or shrubs, whatever is appropriate for that corner. I think the county would, since it would be county property, the county would have the long-term, like grass cutting duties on that, as part of the stadium. I think that's where we are, and I think there was a letter that came out from the state offering that to the county. Apparently, it hit Jack Lennox's email, but I guess it bounced back.
I was going to ask you if Mr. Lennox was back.
Yeah.
We just became aware of it quite recently. And so I think where we are as far as the council's concerned, if the council is so inclined, we would prepare a resolution that would be a conditional acceptance of the estate's offer. And, you know, communicate that to the state. We're interested. I think the number was like 8,500. Is that what they appraised it at? I'm trying to think.
Have you had any conversations with the state just so to meet their review period? Because they said it expired on, or will expire March 24th. So obviously,
Yeah, I have
we
not.
can't get everything done that.
I have not
On
talked
March
with the
24th.
state.
Right.
I thought, let's brief the council, get the council's temperature on this before going.
When you say Mr. Gillis will incur all costs, is that including the price of the land too?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe you'll cover everything.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
review a scope if I may. All the engineering, all the civil engineering, all the deed preparation, all the title transfer, donating money to the county, any expense associated with any type of landscaping or clearing for the property. It becomes contiguous to the stadium or the county property. Keeping in mind the scope of things, I'm not sure what the acreage is of the stadium. I'm going to guess it's 40 or 50 acres. I'm just guessing. This is 2/10 of an acre, but as a person who drives from Ocean City every day, that corner, this will greatly enhance the visibility. And I think, it's been a while, but I think in my conversations with the representatives from the Shorebirds is that they may consider putting a sign there because the visibility will be enhanced quite a bit.
We've had this in front of us at the, I'm on planning and zoning. We've had it, you know, it's not been, not a final plat approval, but anyway, they've been working on it. But you don't want to retain the ownership of that 2/10.
I'm not sure what purpose that would be, but
Other than having to cut the grass on it, yes.
I can't own it.
Yeah.
The state won't transfer it to a private
Oh, okay.
sector.
All right. Okay.
They have to transfer it to a jurisdiction.
Okay.
So I can't own it.
The letter from the state was, it would be transferred.
I knew that, but
And
I mean-
the number was 8,650, 8,650.
Well, I'm a big fan of Wawa. I love their coffee. I think it's the best in the world. But I think Wawa would be very beneficial to that area because they're big sponsors and advertisers for the Delmarva Shorebirds. So I support it.
Any other questions?
Did you have any type of public hearing? I guess this would be more for Joe, for planning and zoning. Do they have public hearings for citizens to come in and give comments?
Not on this one yet, no, we haven't.
It just hasn't been done yet, okay.
Mr. Wilbur, what would the process be?
I just, in my,
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I think what Mr. Holloway is referring to is the planning and zoning for the Wawa, not for this parcel. So this
Yeah.
is just a donation of land to the county.
Sorry about that. I wasn't clear about that. Now, we've been working on the Wawa property.
Correct.
At planning and
But
zoning.
not this.
Not this. This has never been in front of planning and zoning.
okay.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure that there's a process for this to go to planning and zoning. It's just, you're getting a piece of land contiguous to
Got
your
it.
property.
This
But
would
you
not-
believe
This
a-
would not go to planning and zoning. This is a land acquisition by the county that Mr. Gillis would be paying all the expenses for.
Ken, I have another question. Sure. And like I said, I'm a big supporter of Wawa. But anyway, if they do put a sign up there, and we're still going to,
The Shorebirds put a sign.
the Shorebirds will put a
Not
sign up for Wawa.
No. So in the conversations with Shorebirds, it would be
Okay.
a Shorebird Stadium identity, meaning it's not a Wawa at all. It has nothing to do with
Okay.
Wawa.
I
The sign
thought-
there, I apologize. The sign would be like a marquee type thing.
Yeah.
Maybe some events coming up or what have you. It's only on the Shorebirds though.
All right. Somebody earlier had mentioned a sign for Wawa. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
They could advertise. They could use the sign for
In
advertising.
fact, I was telling John and John when I came in here, the developer of this property who develops Wawa thought he was doing the right thing, and I think he bought 3 years' worth of advertising on the billboards at $30,000 a year because he thought he was doing the right thing to facilitate this. That's how long this has been going on.
Any other questions? Mr. Wilbur, what did you say you needed from us? A resolution is what's going to be
Yeah,
next?
Just a consensus to move forward, then I'll prepare a resolution
Okay.
that will perhaps come to your next meeting.
Everybody okay with that?
Mr.
Everybody good?
President.
Yes.
So the email I received on Friday from the state said that they would like to hear a response within 3 business days. Will you guys be reaching out to them?
My thought was,
Okay.
if we had a consensus, then I would reach out immediately.
Okay, I just didn't know about the resolution because that would be 2 weeks away.
Okay, so the letter, it does not have to come from the county council, it would come from Mr. Wilbur?
I think it
Mr.
has
Wilbur,
to
I think
come-
in your letter, you could reiterate that the council has demonstrated its support for this project, is that correct?
A consensus to move forward with a resolution.
Okay,
And we have that.
Is it okay, Larry? Shut up. Does the resolution need to go to the state and with the letter?
Well, all I could do is send them a draft of it,
Yeah.
because I can't send them the final until you act.
Okay,
We're
but-
running out of time.
All right, but there-
May I editorialize
Sure.
on the timeline? I did speak to Grayson Middleton from the governor's office. I mean, I've really been chasing this process for easily 2 years. So Mr. Middleton and the representative of the governor's office in the State Highway Administration understood that this date on this letter and how it wasn't received by the county, they're willing to extend more time. So the March 24th date is extendable. I'm not sure if that's a word, but it can be delayed or extended.
okay.
Particularly if we communicate with them
Yes.
and let them know
Reach out to
we got a
them.
resolution coming.
We're on the way.
Okay, so I believe we have that consensus, and everything
Okay.
is in order for you, Mr. Wilbur. Mrs. Hurley, everything's okay with you, right? Okay, good, fine.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. Good
I
luck.
appreciate you allowing me to come before the salary discussion and compensation discussion. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the proposed pay and compensation plan work session. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for this opportunity for a work session on this. We greatly appreciate it. We answer questions that you may have.
Would you like to give us and the public an overview, if you don't mind, of just what we're looking at here today?
Again, we engaged Bolton to conduct a salary survey to find out where our positions throughout the county fall in to market, and then if those positions were to establish a minimum and a maximum, and then if those positions were there was someone in those positions where their tenure puts them in that minimum maximum range in a step, if you will. The last time we were here and presented this, we have met with the department heads throughout the organization and have gotten their input. There are still some very few minor adjustments to make, but what is before you in a position control document is as a result of that study.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Purcell. Questions?
Is this
Joe?
the only thing they provided you, just this, as far as documents?
They provided us by position the information,
This
yes,
is it?
yes.
That's all they provided you?
Besides the information you guys got in the PowerPoint, yes.
Okay.
Joe?
Well, I guess my first question is, do you plan on following the recommendations?
Yes, what we would like to do is to, across the board, implement those recommendations that Bolton has made.
You're not going to adjust any of the recommendations?
We have met with Bolton, we've met with the department heads, and accordingly, there have been some minor adjustments made, some definitions of positions clarified, and those have been adjusted.
We've not been furnished those.
That's in this information
That's a position
primarily.
control
There's a
document.
couple, there's a couple that are still being, as I said in the memo, there's a couple that are still being refined, but it would be a handful.
Well, the one that jumps out at me the most, that was brought to my attention, is the $33,000 pay increase to one individual. And this, I'm not going to mention any names, and I won't even say what the title is, so, because it'd be easy for people to know, but that individual only has one person working for him. He's not a department head. And I just, when I seen that, I was thinking, where did they come up with this at? How did they come up with that kind of number, $33,000? Are we, and then at the top of that same page, we got a radio manager, systems manager that's not getting anything, and there's a couple other zeros on there, But so, I mean, do you agree with that on that one?
So again, the process was handled by an outside company to look at our job titles across the county and look at them in comparison to the market. And there are ranges. And so based on longevity and those ranges and the I'm looking for a word and I'm not finding it. I apologize.
Based on the duties and responsibilities that they found on the job descriptions and the market research that they came up with, some of them you'll see seem way out of whack for what we've currently used to, but they are justified by the statistics that Bolton was able to recover from the market research.
Yeah, I see some of them, some of them is a lot higher than others, and I guess my question is, do you agree with that $33,000 pay increase for that one individual?
We agree with the process that created the pay increases across the board. I am not going to talk about individuals because, again, this was a process and a plan. And if we start picking and choosing which ones we want to adjust and take out of the process, that negates the process that we went through.
But this was just a study that was a suggestion. This wasn't a mandate, I don't think.
But again, if we are implementing a pay plan, a range for that plan, and a level for each job, and we're looking at the longevity of each person in that job, and then say, well, this person can't get that because that looks too high, or this person should get something but even though they're outside of the range, that negates the objectivity of the process.
And Councilman Hollow, there's another component to this. My understanding, the last time a salary study was uniformly applied was in the early 2000s. So since then, we've had varying degrees of COLAs, varying degrees of incentive pays applied, and varying degrees of all kinds of policies applied in different areas, in different departments. This is a uniform approach, position by position, that if that position became open, and there is also a list of vacant positions there, what it would cost in the market to bring someone in our market to replace that person, or to have a range to bring someone in it. So it's if we had to replace that person to do that position, what would it be? And there are some positions that over time, the skill set needed in today's market has increased that compensation level.
Okay, I never got an answer, but thank you.
Yeah, I'll ask this question with Mr. Davis's blessing. The list of all the employees on here, is this every one of them that's in the county that's been approved?
So
I heard you say a handful, and I didn't know if you're talking about.
No, all of them are on there. There could be, when we would come with a recommended budget amendment, some minor edits to what you see here, because again, we have gone to the department heads and had some additional information provided to us. So this is, you've got a list of all currently filled positions, and then you've got a list of all positions that are currently vacant that are approved for the county.
All right.
With the exception of those in the letter, the sheriff's office, sworn deputies, the
Yeah.
executive, state's
All
attorney.
right. Now, you said adjust some of the salaries. I wonder if the council will consider adjusting any, because the county is way past increase in the salaries, but some may be too much. I don't know. I'm glad that we're doing a study and then we're considering increasing the salaries of our employees.
The goal is to be able to recruit and retain folks.
Absolutely.
So some of them that may be getting a higher increase, you want to retain those people because they have the historical knowledge in the position. And if they can go 20, 30 minutes down the road for $30,000 more, what do you think they're going to do? We want to be able to retain that based on the market value for that and be able to recruit someone should something happen that somebody relocate or leave for whatever reason.
Right, and we can't pay somebody more, hire somebody and pay them more than a current employee in the same position.
Can't promote, yes, to someone, yeah.
Again, I'll try, Councilman Holloway, to explain the answer that you did not understand what I was saying. Jackie said it better than I did. If you have a widget maker that's underpaid and undercompensated in the county and then can go to Worcester County, and it's been historically underpaid here, then that could account for the difference there.
John, I've been hiring people since the 70s. I understand about pay. I understand how you have to pay good money to get good people. I understand all that. My question was very simply, did you agree with the from $70,000 to $103,000 pay increase for that one individual? That's all I ask. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The American Rescue Funds, I can understand using that for fiscal year '22. Since we haven't done a fiscal year '23 budget yet, why would we be using American Rescue Funds for that? Why wouldn't we just use this, take this out of ordinary operating expense?
And that's an option. We wanted to present to council that this was an affordable process to get us to where we need to be in the market. And we have at least one, more than one potentially, with our financial projections for the budget, ways of paying for this. And that is why we presented that information to the council. So ultimately, when you see the budget, our intention is to load these into the budget and fund them, and it might be through a mixture of ways, including American Rescue.
I mean, I would feel much more comfortable if I knew we could afford it. right from the start. And I understand using the American Rescue for fiscal year '22, and I applaud you for getting on this right away. I think it's important to the employees. My concern is that when you say we're going to use American Rescue for fiscal year '23, then I'm immediately saying, as anybody in the public would say, what about '24?
25.
And again, based on, well, we had the audit earlier today, it presented, and we have been doing well with our revenue collection. We presented one way of funding. We can look at funding it with regular dollars. I personally would not have presented something that I don't believe is sustainable. And if we don't make these changes, where we're going to have issues is the retention and recruitment of additional employees and current employees.
How will it be sustainable in '24? What, those are the assurances I guess we're looking for, because we're getting this started, and I think there would be reluctance to get this started if all of a sudden we have a train wreck in '24, and just some assurances that we know '24 will be good.
I mean, I can't look into a crystal ball, but based on the projections that we have been looking at long-term, we feel that it is sustainable in '24 without American Rescue dollars.
And getting back to the audit that you mentioned that was presented earlier, I mean, they gave us the trends all the way from 17 to today.
Yes.
And our revenues from our income tax revenues have increased every year substantially in this, it was $8 million in this
Yes.
past year.
Unexpectedly.
Unexpected, right.
$8
But they've
million.
increased every year.
Yes.
Along with the 2% on the property tax revenue and whatever other base we get with that is increased every year from 17. So, like you say, you combine our revenue sources, we're seeing.
And that's what, again, we presented using American Rescue funds because of the fact that let's get this jump-started, but we would not have jump-started it if we didn't feel it was sustainable.
And the other thing I would say, and it's kind of a privilege to be in this position because I can state my opinion if I'd like to, and you all are kind enough to take it into consideration. What if in your planning process that let's say any income increases in allocations to the employees, if it's, let's say, over $3,000 or over $5,000, that the county do it on a graduated basis over a 3-year process. In other words, like Joe's concerned about 30,000. What if you were to say, okay, that's a huge number. The employee would be just as happy to have 10,000, 10,000, and 10,000 in those increments.
So would the employee be just as happy if their job is valued by this study to grow? Would you personally be happy to take a third of that and
Let
wait
me
two?
rephrase that.
But
Yeah.
no,
I
can I
understand.
please finish?
Sorry.
I'll take a third of that now and wait 2 more years to get the rest, or I go to the next county and get it all now.
Right, it's a very wrong statement, okay? I stated that incorrectly. Not so much would the employee be as happy, because they would not. Would the county be more fiscally responsible if they explained to the employee, here's the new target level that we have come up with? In a sense, we're trying to keep our house in order too, and it's
But we're
not impossible, but we're actually reaching out for other funds to make this happen. It would be more responsible as a county for us to implement this in a 3-year stage.
So there's where
Live within your means.
we believe we have the means to do this. We wouldn't have presented it if we didn't.
All right.
And additionally, we are creating problems for our county by not getting our employees to market now.
We can't afford not to do this. So if we have, we're asking people to accept that 3-year out, when in the past, from what I understand, there has been on occasion a failing on the administration not to honor such agreements. And that's kind of where it's a multifaceted implementation plan here.
You addressed that when you presented the study originally to us, that was addressed. There was certainly more benefits to doing it now as
And
opposed to
we-
trying to phase it in.
We have a major problem across multiple county departments, retaining the people that we have and recruiting new ones. If we do not reset what the levels are for those positions and reset them to what the market says, which is what this is, and reset it all at once, we will continue to have the retaining and recruiting issues that we have and have problems filling the positions that our county residents need to make sure our government is providing the services that they need and want.
Let
Well,
me,
the cost of training all of those new folks that go through the academy or go through whatever training needed to be able to fully do their positions. I think we need to advocate for our employees because, we get calls in HR from people, that are looking for another position, and we've been telling them, we're in the midst of this study, hold on, wait for us, I think we need to advocate for our folks to put this in place and not only wait for July, but if we're able to do this in April, I think that's a great thing that could help our numbers, because not only is the great resignation everywhere, but it's certainly affecting Wicomico County and our vacancies and what we're seeing with turnover.
let me say this for the people in the audience and the ones that's watching on PAC 14. Most of these raises aren't very large. For the majority of them, there's $700 a year, some of them $3,000 a year, $2,500 a year. So they're not great, huge amounts of money that's going. I brought that $30,000 up because that jumped out at me. And when you've got somebody that's getting, a $700 a year raise or a $900 a year raise, and then you've got one individual getting a $30,000 raise, $33,000 raise. But for the people that's watching this, the majority of these raises aren't huge, and they're needed. I understand that. I mean, I support that. Because we know, I've talked to some of the department heads, and they'll say, hey, we just can't hire people. We haven't, they apply and they don't show up, or, and it all evolves around pay. And like I told John before, I've been, prior to what we do now at home, in years past, I've hired people, and I know what it takes to keep people. I guess I didn't need an explanation on that, but thanks anyway. But so I guess the thing I'm looking at, there's some $10,000 a year raises, $12,000 a year raises, $13,000 or $15,000. Some of the higher end, and most of those people that are getting that are making higher end money now. And I don't know. I just think that you probably need to go through each one of these and fine tune them a little bit. I think John's correct that it's not everybody's going to just walk out the door because they don't get this raise. Back in 2007 when the recession hit, we had to do RIFs. There wasn't any pay increases. And I remember one employee telling me that she understood what was going on, but she was happy to have a job, and she had her benefits, and she didn't basically say it was a good thing that what we were doing, but she understood. And you talk about funding this through, would you call it ARF money or
American Rescue.
American Rescue funds? If you look at what their inflation rate is right now and what's going to be happening, could happen in the near future, I think, like John said, we need to be a little more cautious of what we're doing. So anyway.
I had a couple questions. So when they were meeting with the department heads, did they have like a position description that they were going by when they were gauging the salaries?
The job descriptions were provided. Yes, some of the position description questionnaires were provided as well. They had phone discussions with those listed departments to review the structure of their department.
Okay.
As we've learned, each department that we have is unique in their own way, so that's why the call was with the Bolton representative to really go through the ins and outs of each department so that each head of the department could explain how Wicomico County does it versus, if they've worked with one of the other counties on the Eastern Shore, to know maybe that there's a difference between the two to be able to grade the positions appropriately.
And then I was wondering if they did that with the council office also, because we are part-time council members, and so we have,
You can do it with the council themselves.
no, not the council
did.
office.
We
The
did.
council administrator, yes, and the internal auditor also
Just
participated on a
for
call.
clarification, he did not ask me about my job description. And he just wanted to talk about the individual positions. That was after the study was done. He did not meet with me and ask me any questions about structure or anything like that.
I thought they were supposed to meet with department heads before they made a
He
decision.
did not meet with me.
Jackie, could you
Not
maybe
before.
ask him to meet with Laura?
He has met
They
with.
have had a call since, yes. Initially, when.
Does he have any new
some of the other-
recommendations?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Well, I think that's easy to resolve. You all understand, I think, quite well what the responsibilities of Mrs. Hurley's job is, as you do every department in the county. And I think you would make that adjustment accordingly, right? I would assume.
And we have been trying to not adjust on our own. We are relying on the information of a professional who is better at this and knows the market better than us. So for us to make changes to amounts that are not supported by their study goes back to processes before, where employees then have felt that the study was invalid because the administration made changes that were not recommended.
Well, and I understand that, but you know as well as I do that there's always nuances that all the data in the world can't define. And I think that's why you always have to consider the human element as to what we might want to incorporate here. So, that being said, I don't know, maybe I didn't read it all carefully enough, but I'm not quite sure what the determination was, whether they were taking into account that, and I'm not trying to single one individual out at all, but that's the topic we have right now. But, you have one individual that is in charge of the entire legislative branch of Wicomico County and 7 very difficult people to work with. So I think somehow or other that has to come into consideration at one point in time or another. Again, there are little tiny things that all the data and all the studies in the world aren't going to show you that we recognize and understand better than they might. And that's just not this position. That could be some others too.
Yeah.
Yes, Josh.
So I guess the only thoughts on my mind is I was looking at this originally and seeing the old grade to the new grade, and I can't really make heads or tails, particularly I see a 17 going to an M35 or M34 or 36. I just assume that you all know what you're doing and that this looks good enough. I mean, if it makes sense to the employees and the department heads feel comfortable, then all that's great. I guess there's we did actually put together a good group of questions that we all had kind of going into this. And I think one of them, I just want to start bringing them up. The pay classification is based on longevity with the county. Is that right? Yes. And is there, with the question of whether or not there should be a performance component to it, which I generally have not really been a fan of in general, but if there's anything you want to reflect on with regard to the how the pay classification plan is put together.
So the classification plan is put together currently with a longevity basis. And then our intention, which we stated at the last meeting, was that we would look at it over the next year and look at implementing a performance-based component. But to get something started, instead of waiting for everything to be done, we went with the longevity base and then want to implement a appropriate performance-based component.
Well, the other quick questions. what is the current, is there a current policy for how often we do a salary review, a complete? Should we adopt one? I mean, it sounds like we've gone far too long without doing so, and that is, now we're catching up, which is part of the challenge here, right?
The last one was done in 2017. I was not here during that, but I don't believe all positions were looked at like we have with this one with the full-time positions, nor do I know the implementation process that was had back then. That's why we're covering all full-time positions with a few exceptions that have been noted in the letter to be able to do this on a fair and consistent basis across the board.
I'd love to see that as a regular policy, and actually, I would love to see that as another way, including the county council and county executive salaries included as a check on our own group that we put together to review that. But that being said, either side. As far as the ARP component, that sounds good to me. If you all are good, our employees are so desperately need to have their pay raised. They're leaving in droves from all county government, not just ours or any of the city or others. I also going to trust your feelings and your thoughts, I guess, on I don't trust the federal government pretty much any way. But the state level, I do trust them a lot better. But I don't trust the fact that we may or may not have our disparity grants in the future. So if you all feel confident with that, that's great. But I don't know that, the Appropriations Committee's been talking about that for years of cutting, and it's going to save them. We're in a good moment right now with state funds, but that's not going to, I can't imagine we're going to be that way in a couple years from now. So if you feel confident with that, that's all good. And especially knowing that, inflation, we've got other issues on the rise. This was done really before the full effects of the inflation have risen. So I'll leave it at that, and basically I trust your overall judgment in this, and there are some quite significant jumps, but we've been really underfunded. It's pretty bad when people are leaving government to go to the nonprofit sector, which is where I work in, which has historically been really low funds, but there's been a ton of people jumping into the nonprofit sector, and they're coming from government.
Well, a couple other points is, the whole objective here is trying to get these positions to that 50th percentile. I mean, we're still just getting to the average at the end of the day. But, some of the comments about, well, we should dial this back or so forth, this is not the time to be doing that. I mean, economically, we have the lowest unemployment rate in decades. The biggest problem across the country is people leaving jobs for other jobs because, it's such a great time for employees to move up the scale, and and as an employer for 34 years, the best hiring practice is retention. Not hiring people, is retaining people. If you can retain people, then you don't have to hire people, and so just all the stars have really kind of lined up for us to do this. We have the money even without our funds. We're in a good position. We have, we're just financially very sound. We just had, our auditors just confirmed that. So to me, everything's lining up to make this work. There's going to be some, you start looking at the differences. Yeah, you see numbers are all over the place, but that's what it takes to get it. If we were doing this 3 years from now, they're not going to look like that, because we're going to have them where they're supposed to be. So.
Any other questions? Just curious, where does it go from here?
I think that decision's up to council. It does have to come back in a legislative bill at some point.
To be a legislative bill, most budget amendments have been resolutions.
I believe Mr. Mitchell has an opinion on that.
Yeah, this is.
Mr. Mitchell, you'll need to use your mic. Thanks.
Yeah, this is different than just changing one thing here or there as a resolution would go. And if I could find, I think I gave an opinion on this, if I can figure out where I put it. But it's unlike the change to the state's attorney, where the salary where the state of Maryland mandated you shall pay this. Mm-hmm. That's purely administrative. This is a change in all the salaries and to some extent the way they're configured. Let me see, I got it. The second item, which is the one we're talking about now, significant changes therefore will require a bill. The bill could be a budget bill unless the pay classification is taken up and passed before then. It's just my opinion that when it's this comprehensive and it's changing so many things that have been in existence for so long, has a pretty big impact on the budget, it should be a bill.
If I know a bill appropriately, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that requires 2 readings, and it also then requires a 60-day, and so there would be no implementation in fiscal '22.
Well, I respect that 100% because the first thing I thought was commendable was the fact that you were trying to make it work in '22. Unfortunately, I think, we have to go with whatever legal is going to say. I don't get in the middle of that. I certainly could defer to Mr. Wilbur if you want to if you think there might be a second opinion on this, Mr. Wilbur.
Talk about that. I mean,
Mr. Wilbur, you
a resolution is supposed to be either temporary or administrative, and the complexity and comprehensive nature of this, I think, makes it anything but administrative.
Andy and I talked about this and the comprehensive nature of this. I know we have a long history of doing budget amendments by resolutions primarily, not by legislative bill. So I understand that's going to be a delay in the implementation time of this. And I will just make an offhand comment. When we get to this section in charter review, I think we should make it by resolution, so we don't have this issue in the future, but that's not for right now.
That's one of the things we talked about, not just this, but where it'll say in the charter by law, you ought to decide which law you want, resolution or bill, and make it plain. Sometimes we pass something and say, my experience is you'll pass something and then say in that it can be amended by resolution or bill, even though the original was a bill.
Is there any way to do it faster? I'll say this, I'm just trying to think of something out of the box, but, can it be considered emergency legislation?
Well, I looked at that, and there's a specific sentence in that section that essentially says we can't do salary increases, wage increases by emergency.
Cannot.
Cannot. That's what the charter says. It has to be essentially a health, safety emergency. Yep.
So, to accomplish this in this fiscal year, can only happen one way, then, is to pass a legislative bill, wait the 60 days, but let us retroactively pay our employees from '22 funds. And I'd have to actually go talk to the auditors because the 60 days is going to run out before the end of the fiscal year. Because if I'm correct, don't we need to does it have to be advertised at 2 weeks?
Yes.
So that if I'm thinking of the calendar right, we're looking at first reading next month, beginning of next month.
You don't have time. The whole reason why we introduced the police accountability legislation today was to meet that July 1st timeline.
So
that
again, the
it's
only way,
not gonna
and
work.
that's why I'm saying is that the only way, and I'd have to actually see if the auditors would even allow it, is to accrue it in fiscal '22 and pay it in fiscal '23. Or we could add a payout in the fiscal '23 budget, because that's the only way I can get employees the funds for 3 months. Or we just include it in the budget.
Well, I was you're going, once again, I'm trying to think of some way to make all this work. But when you start talking about the time frame, well, I'm starting to think, well, we're going to do the budget before
Correct.
that. Can it be part, is there a way
We
to
can- we
make
can
it part of the budget? and
We
the
can do again, our intention was to include all of this in the budget, but the other piece that we could include in the budget would be a retroactive payment for the 3 months that were missed.
I think that might get us there quicker than
Yeah, right, your budget's July 1, you're going to pass it in June, and
I've been thinking the same thing. Why not just do it in the
put
budget?
it in the budget. Yeah.
That was
mean,
in
if-
my opinion, that's one way you can do it.
Now, I mean, council would have to understand that the number in the budget would be 15 months' worth of salary and benefits, not 12 months, because we would be making up for the fact that we didn't pay it in April, May, and June.
Right, I mean, you would put that in the
It would-
preface.
Yes, it would be in
Right.
the notes
Yes.
and the information for council.
Mr. Wilbur, we've approved raises before with the ARPA funding. I believe that was the resolution.
Correct.
That wasn't actually raises, those were,
Compensation, some type of,
but those were like a bonus
Okay.
type
Yep.
thing. So it wasn't actually raising a base salary.
right. So what I was wondering if, even though you would do the base salary, et cetera, in the operating budget for the new year, but for '22, could you just do a resolution where you were just releasing ARPA funding for for increases, just similar to what we did before?
I would I'm sorry, I'm interrupting Paul.
It's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. That's okay.
Yeah, the thing that makes this, we think, a little different is it's so comprehensive.
Okay.
It's not just amounts, but we've got job descriptions. It's a whole job and pay program.
The
Yeah.
It's not the idea that you just determine that one department or 7 employees and a certain, for particular reasons you need to give them a raise. That may be a resolution. This is you're redoing the entire system. Every person's being looked at. It really needs to be a bill.
And then
But the retroactive thing could be built into that.
the other piece is that American Rescue, if I'm remembering the guidance right, we need to make it a salary change to be able to take it out of American Rescue. Bonuses have all kinds of restrictions on who can get them and who can't get them. And so that is part of the reason why we didn't go down that path. Again, we went down that path for a couple that were allowed,
Right.
but for the ones that weren't, we didn't go down that path because those didn't qualify for American Rescue. If we tried to do a bonus type thing for the last 3 months of this year, it would be out of all of our operating results. It would not qualify, I do not believe it would qualify for American Rescue.
All right, so if we do it as part of the budget, but if we fund the salary study changes with the American Rescue dollars, does that sort of help keep our budget consistent in terms of, like, does that really influence the budget in terms, what I'm trying to get at here is like, the budget's going to, you said it's going to be 15 months, not 12 months when it comes to pay. But if those funds come from the American Rescue, then does that necessarily?
It would not impact the bottom line.
It wouldn't impact the bottom line.
Because it
Right.
wouldn't be coming from our standard operating revenue. So
Right.
again, you would have a one-for-one.
So our standard
offset.
operating revenue looks just like it should look.
Yes.
If we use the American Rescue dollars, yeah, that seems, because we were debating whether to use those or not, but I think this says we need to use the American Rescue dollars to
So
do.
we could use, at a minimum, we could use the American Rescue dollars to fund 3 months of our next fiscal year. And we could say it's our July, August, and September 3 months. And then the other 3 months are coming out of our operating, and again, it's a wash. It's same number, but the difference would be coming from American Rescue and would not be coming from our operating.
And it really wouldn't be 3 months, but it would just be the amount of the increases.
Well, it's 3 months
So it'd
increases.
be much less than 3 months'
Yes,
salary. It'd
yes,
be
it's-
maybe 1 month.
Well, it's not full salary, it's the
Increase.
3 months, the difference,
I got you.
Prorated.
prorated across 3 months.
Gotcha. All right, everybody okay with this? Look, again, some nods. Larry,
I'm thinking.
on this end.
I think it's the only way to get it done timing-wise.
I mean, I think it's unfortunate that we got it so late, and so we're gonna have to make the adjustment.
Okay, Josh?
Hey, I hope the county employees understand how much we are working. We did what we said we would do. We've been talking about this process for quite a while, and I applaud you all for trying to do this as quickly as possible to be able to get it and make it happen. So Wicomico is a place we want to come work, and I hope the county employees hear that. So yeah, I definitely.
Okay, All right, that's great. And, yeah, I would concur with Josh. I do like the fact that you wanted to bring it into 22 and not just 23, so very good. Not an easy haul, huh?
Mr. President, I
Yes.
do have a couple of things to
Certainly.
point out. So I noticed that there are some positions that don't have pay grades. I think those should be added.
The system actually doesn't have them.
Right, there are some positions that they were,
I did go back through a previous budget, and they were included in fiscal year 14, so I know they exist.
What happened is the system right now does not have them for those positions. I mean, we can put them back in, but it's not something that's in the system right now. So we were going with what was in the system and what we have to present.
At some point, they got taken out, which is
So
interesting.
you're asking that they be put back in?
I am, yeah, I think that, in order
Is
to
that
make the
feasible?
document complete, they should be shown.
these are the current grades, correct? Not the proposed ones?
Well, I think you should do both. I mean, the proposed is already there, but the
Right.
current ones.
Proposed are included
yeah,
for everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's a couple that are missing current grades, yes. That's,
And then the job title column is fine, but then the new job title, you have some that did not change but are still in that new job title. And a good one is like the court reporter.
so what we were trying to show, and we can easily transfer them over. What we were trying to show is these are the changes, so that you didn't have to, so if it has a blank in that column, it's retaining the old title.
But what I'm saying is like, if it's there's some of them that are listed in that new job title column that do not appear to have any changes.
See.
Are you following me? I mean, if you were to
That's possible.
go,
I'm looking at Community Clerk 1, and that is unchanged, but it was included in the change column.
right, court reporter is still court reporter.
Yes,
So-
some of them are remaining the same, so they
I mean-
should not have been in that new column.
Right.
We'll make sure that it's just new titles.
And then, what about inactive positions?
Inactive positions are not listed. It's only approved budgeted positions.
Okay, so if someone wanted to reinstate, like, say, the public information officer position,
We'd have to come before council and
Okay.
get it approved, like we did when we reactivated.
The major position.
The major position in the fall.
okay,
Is that it?
yeah.
Okay, great. Any other comments, questions? Any other, no? All
Thank
good?
you. You guys
Thank
have
you
a
very
good
much.
afternoon,
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
guys and gals. Sorry, I just
Thank
use
you very
guys.
much.
Thank you, John. Entertain a motion to
Mike.
adjourn.
So moved.
Second.